Hey friends, today's video will not feature any background gameplay because I really haven't played that much, and the content that I did record, honestly it wasn't that entertaining. I was falling asleep at the wheel. It was just basic progression slop. So anyway, enjoy the video, get those dishes done, drive safely. Hey friends, a proper Edge of Fate review is in the works, but for now I can summarize what I have played through so far. I've been meticulously logging my hours played to give better feedback on player progression and the Destiny hobby. I'll save those specific numbers for a future video when I finish going through the entire progression system. Although it might take longer than I thought, because right now, outside of the game, in real life, I'm hard focusing on my health, education, and side hobbies, which explains the lack of videos since the new expansion dropped. Look at this funny comment on the screen right now. So let's get into it, starting with the campaign. I ain't that guy for narrative reviews, I'll defer that elsewhere, but I have heard great things from my friends who are normally into that. Now, strictly speaking, on story gameplay mechanics, the final mission combined all the gameplay mechanics from previous missions together at once. Any of the mechanics alone overstayed their welcome. I feel that the campaign would have felt more engaging if it picked up the pace and stopped spoon feeding. Even on the legendary difficulty, the combat was lackluster. My reward for nuking a boss, despite it being on legendary, was to see an immunity shield pop up. The only and most obvious solution to this was to find a matter spark pad and find the hole in the wall, or floor. Instead, it could have been so much more interesting with maybe like the boss becoming more dangerous, tanky, frenzied, etc. once you hit certain health gates, with then more intricate matter spark puzzles being an alternate way to kill the boss if the player lacked that combat expertise. The setting and location was interesting, and along the way I did get curious about secret resources locked behind future upgrades. To my surprise though, about half the secrets could be completed in unintended ways with either extremely precise matter spark piloting or by using something like mountaintop and glacier grenades to successfully take the wrong path faster. None of this is really what I look forward to with Destiny, but I'm always down to go into it with an open mind. I don't buy campaign skips, even though monetary-wise it makes sense for me to do as a content creator, so any amount of fun I can infuse into the campaign, the better. Even so, I'd say that the main campaign mechanics were very much on rails, so I doubt my replays would be even slightly more interesting or significantly faster. Only later did I discover that the Mythic campaign has hands. I wish this was an option from the get-go, so I'd be able to appreciate the combat side of the campaign. I'd imagine after these Force campaign replays, I'm going to be too burned out to waste my time on Mythic missions that most of my friends have already completed, nor will I waste my time running them solo since they don't scale down to solo play. I would have happily locked in and smoked the Mythic campaign solo, given the option to originally. Lord help me if I end up completing these for a cool reward, just to have to later redo them for Guardian ranks. Also, by the way, Guardian ranks do affect drop quality. Let's talk about the progression systems and the portal. Disclaimer, we can agree that Destiny is at its best when the population/player numbers are at their highest. While I personally think most gaming progression systems are arbitrary and weak, the purpose progression systems serve is important to new player onboarding and creating a ritual, which ultimately leads to a better player population. Therefore, even if I think a progression system is weak and arbitrary, its inclusion is likely healthier for my long-term Destiny experience. I think they're focusing on a foundation to build upon, and I think the portal could grow to be something fun. I like the option of no HUD gameplay, for example. It's so much more aesthetic. Continuing on with current criticisms though, there are other games with fantastic progression systems that have some things in common. Most importantly, they make you feel engaged because the difficulty of the content matches harmoniously to the combat output of the player. In addition, for elite level players, there is sometimes a fast track to endgame. I don't feel that Destiny currently strikes that balance of combat output versus combat difficulty, even when you take into account the customization of the portal. I'm going to put the word customization in quotations because I expected to be able to finally create some demonic difficulty in exchange for expediting the slop progression. Turns out at the lower power level gates, fewer options are available, and even if you did crank all the negative modifiers on, it doesn't make any sense to attempt it since you're only getting tier 1 or tier 2 armor anyway as a reward for a significantly longer completion time, nor are you jumping up in power level at a rate that justifies leaving God mode. For the majority of early and mid progression, my Guardian one-shots almost everything. I can tab over to the other monitor mid-combat, select a specific song, read the description, read a couple comments, tab back into Destiny, and find out that only half my health bar is gone. So a question for the viewer. How long do you think players should be in the God mode zone for early and mid progression? Like seriously, close your eyes and think of that number. Is it 5 hours? 10 hours? 50 hours? Think about it for a couple seconds. So now real quick, when I say God mode zone, that's a great way for brand new players, low experience players, etc., to acclimate to the game systems in a way that doesn't overwhelm them. As they gain experience and skill, the progression system should slightly start opening up to match their effective combat output to the current difficulty. The portal wants to act as a buffer for players slightly above and slightly below the projected combat output. For Destiny veterans, let alone elite players, the progression system doesn't open up fast enough to curb boredom. These players will always choose the path of fastest and least resistance rather than what is fun because it gets them to the fun faster. Not that fun is an option anyway, since the cool modifiers and difficulty are saved for later power level brackets. Now, slightly different wording on that question I asked you to think about. How long do you think Bungie thinks players should be in the God mode zone for early and mid progression? I've been logging my hours played but haven't finished, so I have to speculate my own guess. I'll have a real answer in a later video though. My guess is they expect the early progression to take about 25 hours of active play or about 15 hours of tactical daily and weekly reward cycling. Once you're out of the God mode zone, you reach the now I have to look at the screen segment of progression, which is dangerously close to the no matter what I do, these enemies are bullet sponges, fuck this shit, I'm only doing activities where I can speedrun past the ads to nuke the boss segment of progression. Be careful though, if you're too good at this, keep it to yourself. You wouldn't want to alert Bungie that you're not interested in spending 40 minutes on something that doesn't entertain you to get an arbitrary power level requirement to play the fun and rewarding activities. They'll put a stop to that shit with a swiftness. After the speedrun slop era of progression, you finally reached the fun. Oh wait, time gates. Psych bitch you thought. If you want tier 5 loot, you gotta wait. Real talk though, I don't think tier 5 armor is necessary for any player outside of the niche damage rotation min-maxers, and of course, elite PvP players. Even then, I think smart build crafting can skip the need for tier 5s entirely, especially since the progression system resets every 6 months. It might feel kind of pointless to even go for high tier loot. But I am going to argue that for PvP players, since the playlist including trials are not power level enabled, it's entirely worth to go for a tier 5 set if you found yourself near the end of a progression system before the end of the 6-month cycle. Because if you end up creating a strong build for PvP, it's not like it goes away once we go into the new cycle, you just get to keep using it, which means you might be able to entirely skip the slot progression in future expansions. If you're willing to progress via PvP only, it will be a little slower though. PvEers, on the other hand, unless we see some gamer armor set bonuses in the future, you're going to be behind the 8 ball keeping up with old armor illegal spikes. I did mention these in a previous video and advised that the non-world first contender type players not waste their time, since one would think that the set bonuses would eventually present a better trade-off. This topic goes hand in hand with JRPG menu gameplay. The more specifically strong the armor, the more likely you'll need to consider it in a menued rotation, and if you're gonna menu anyway, then I'm gonna argue that tier 5s for stats alone are not worth it for PvE players. The damage resistance you get for being the new season armor is nice, but it's very likely that you'll always have at least a few old armor menu swaps in your arsenal anyway. Your tank armor will almost always be whatever the newer set is, but I don't really have a horse in this race regarding an over-reliance on menu swaps in a contest setting. I've always been the type of player to learn whatever strat easily saves the most time and focus. I just put that saved time and focus into what I really find fun and important, or I turn my brain off, talk with friends, and watch some anime on the side. So menuing is no big deal to me. If you said menuing feels intrusive to combat, I'd agree. I'd rather they abandon mid-combat menuing completely to replace it with a hotbar system of abilities and alternate weapon transmats that completely give a new skill ceiling to real-time combat. So long story short, PvE players don't really need to break their back going for tier 5s, but they'll likely encounter them anyway since they have to slog through the progression system to get to the fun stuff that already happens to be dropping tier 5s. At least you have something to grind for, right? 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 So let's talk PvP progression now. If you chose the progression path of absolute least resistance, PvP is your friend. I advise spending the first 10 hours of this expansion acquiring tier 1 armor that gives a beneficial PvP effect, especially look for class items since the old class items do not give any stats. Once you have some health and weapon sets, start making basic builds for your preferred environment. The real trade-off between a tier 1 and a tier 5 completed armor set is the addition of the super stat having a higher number. Either you can afford to get a super in mud matches, or you can't. If you only play 6s, this isn't a deal breaker to the fun in my opinion. The health or weapon stat will likely be the 2 build opportunity cost to create your build around. And like I said earlier, you might play enough to passively complete a tier 5 set by the end of a season, then you can just keep using that to see a specific armor set bonus that motivates you to upgrade in a future 6-month cycle. Keep in mind that you might have to play 200 hours plus of PvP per 6-month cycle to make enough forward progress to effectively farm tier 5s again the next time. I'll have a specific number of hours played to give you later, but for now, 200 hours is my uneducated guess. Assuming the PvP sandbox is in a good spot, I think 200 hours is light work, and it might even be lighter work if Trials rapidly gives meaningful progress. I'll give Bungie the pass for now for having the game in shambles regarding PvP, but I fully expect PvP to be given priority health updates once these new systems are understood by the player base at large. I wouldn't blame any of my PvP friends if they sat out this expansion in its entirety. Me, on the other hand, I look at these new systems like a blank canvas, and I've been given new paint. Self-damage Risk Runner is looking like just the tip of the iceberg here. There are some absolutely idiotic fun combinations to put together, and I'm excited to share both the successes and the failures in future videos. Since PvP isn't in a good spot right now, I'm still mainly going to focus on endeavors outside the game, ready to completely walk away if it doesn't get a health update to make competitive matches feel dynamic. I'm not going to actively grind for tier 5 sets while the game is in a bad spot. I used to future-proof like crazy. The best comparison I can give to how stacked my vault is y'all remember that scene from Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift where Han throws the keys at Sean to drive his car Mona? My vault was Mona. I could lend my account to any content creator and they would have the most competitive combinations of armor and weapons of any vault I'm aware of. If I could describe the PvP sandbox in terms of Tokyo Drift, then I'm ready to have fun drifting, but the road is full of potholes. This bleeds into my attention to detail in PvE too. I no longer find it worth it to be a PvE understander. I'm now just a speedrun copycat. The firing range was a long awaited addition. Can I even call it an addition if we had one before? Well, the long awaited addition to more easily test out build ideas. However, they added a lot of cool features, but I'd argue it lacks perhaps the most significant testing options of both Guardians and Raid Boss parsing. Don't get me wrong though, it's a night and day difference from what we had, not having to go to the Cosmodrome to fight a Guardian rank 2 player over killing 3 dregs to test a perk interaction real quick. At the rate of disinterest I'm feeling over the progression system, give it 2 or 3 more seasons and I'll no longer be a general Destiny encyclopedia for my stream viewers. At least that's how I was feeling before I saw a glimpse of the raid. Holy shit. This one minus the bugs seemed incredible. I sat this one out because of a few reasons. Even if I did attempt it though, I'd have probably failed this one. I'm not in practice, I'm not in the right headspace, I'm not going to be able to lock in right now. So the reasons I sat this one out are, reason number 1, the anime pool party was on the same day. I'm just kidding. I decided to do that after I had already decided not to do the raid. The real reason is that I'm focusing on my health and don't want to spend 18 hours a day prepping 3 characters and trailblazing rotation ideas. While Thunderlord wasn't on my bingo card to be on the first clear team, I did guess the rest of the swap rotations and team composition by just trusting my previous knowledge. I even guessed some of the sweatiest rotations other teams had to cook up to catch up. Let me put some respect on Thunderlord. LFG randoms make it seem like such a throw with how they selfishly expect 5 other players to do the mechanics, handle both buff and debuff refreshing, while possibly adding an extra phase for not using the easier and better flavor of the season damage option. At least that was the case most of the time. But damn it, in the right scenario, which is super generation and extended damage phases, Thunderlord gets the job done, and I'll be hard-pressed to take it off if it's not causing extra phases when the better meta, if any, gets discovered. I suspect the better meta might actually be Grand Overture, but we don't know for sure. Reason number 2 I didn't do the raid is because I expected them to either overcorrect from Salvation's Edge, and this would be a Mickey Mouse raid that I could show up hungover on Sunday night to rip a one-and-done guide studied clear, or I expected them to go all in to encounters akin to Verity. And I'd probably be bored out of my mind when my favorite part of contest mode is difficult combat. My oh my, was I wrong. This raid feels like it was perfectly crafted for my brand of enjoyment. I am very excited to crank some unholy damage rotations when I leave my PvP cave. My only concern is that Bungie will now feel compelled to change this amazing raid formula to give the other kinds of players something to appreciate, which would make me feel like I'd be wasting my time to practice relentlessly for an activity I'm not even sure I'll like in 357 days. Low bans, speedruns, master content challenges, and the like are all great practice tools and accolades for eventually putting together a strong PvE squad. Those do take time and effort away from other endeavors though, and I'm not gonna lie, in my opinion, the feeling of clairvoyance and painting yellow numbers in PvP, that flow state is a better dragon to chase than any PvE last wish Ahamkara. By the way, I'm still waiting for Destiny to have an FPS competitor. If not sooner than later, I'll be quitting and swapping to genres only to return when it has some significant positive change or a competitor in the same sub-genre space. If somehow this raid gets announced to have a rerun because of the copious amount of bugs, I might crawl out of casual retirement because it looked very fun. At the very least, I'm going to master the master mode like I did for Salvation's Edge, since I also thought it was a cool raid. I believe I covered most of what I wanted to now. Y'all can expect some light PvP content from me in the future. I'll be going to GCX this weekend, so if you see me, don't hesitate to say hi. I've been really working on myself lately, and I think I cracked the code of being my authentic self again. Social situations used to charge my batteries, but the last few years, they seem to drain them instead. So I'd say I'm about 40% there. And I know exactly what I need to do to be at 100% again sooner than later. So some quick words of advice for congoers. Don't be that guy hovering around a group. Just interrupt, then apologize, quickly introduce yourself, and either say your piece and go, or stay and add to the conversation when appropriate. Content creators are normal-ass people too, and they're at the event to talk to people that make their shared communities enjoyable. Don't stare too much, don't think so much, you're at an event to have fun and have some good conversations. If you want to chat and they're not preoccupied, just send it. You have the luxury of being at an event where the attendees are all clones of you in some regard. The conversation will be the easy part. Consider it like a conversational Pokemon battle. If you lock eyes, I'm either going to say hi to you, or if I see you're talking someone else up, I'll be sure to interrupt and thank you for letting me borrow the Lambo last week, or something like that. And I think that's a fine note to end this video on. Thank you friends for listening this far, and I'll make a proper review and recommendation for Edge of Fate when I finish logging the hours played. Take care.